Emanators, the strongest mortal beings in the universe. The entities blessed by the aeons with power that we ourselves can't even really comprehend. Some can annihilate galaxies, and others can destroy souls. And some do absolutely nothing. But throughout our journey through the stars, we have encountered emanators and pseudo-emanators with abilities so overpowering that few mortals could ever hope to stand a chance. With two known emanators taking the cake for having the most impressive on-screen feats and accomplishments in this entire story. Namely, Madame Herta and Raiden Balsan Mori May, representing Nous of the Erudition and Ix of the Nihility. So what if these two faced off? What if these absolute forces of nature clash in a battle of aeonic proportions, undoubtedly disintegrating planets from the sheer fallout of their attacks? But who would come out on top? Who would be the last one standing? Or as Lygus would say, would it be mutually assured destruction? Well, that is the question I aim to answer today. Why? Because it would be cool. And Amphroeus is sad, so we need something fun to distract us in the meantime. So today we're talking she who can't cook versus she who can't taste. Because this is the strongest playable emanator revealed. Okay, so first things first, these two have absolutely no reason to fight, and I don't think they ever will. This is purely just for fun. But we will be going by confirmed feats and lore strength along with a couple of inferences that we're gonna need to make here. Good. So let's start off with one of the first emanators we ever met face to face, the Self-Annihilator, wielder of the Blade of Origin and the Blade of Naught, the Voidwalker, the guide of the unmoving still waters of oblivion, and she who weeps for the departed before she strikes them down, Raiden Balsan Mori May, aka Acheron. Oh boy, and where do we start with this absolute powerhouse? I gotta make sure I do her justice because her fan base is terrifying. But to be honest with you, that won't be too much of a problem because she just happens to be one of my favorite characters. So let's start off with the source of her power, because that just might be her biggest advantage in this duel. Because as we know, each and every emanator is given their power directly from an aeon, and the power that they get is entirely dependent on said aeon. For example, Aha was able to give a portion of his power to a worm, specifically Fathomless Intelligence. Then when the worm didn't do anything with it, Aha decided to give the entirety of his power to the worm. So, as goofy of a source as this is, this proves that the Aeons can control the amount of power they give their emanators access to. But the way this applies to Acheron is a strong possibility that Ix simply doesn't care how much power Acheron gets to use. Because as the Aeon of nothingness and pointlessness, what would be the point of restraining an emanator? So it is very possible that she has unlimited access to the Nihility's power. However, this isn't an auto win for Acheron in this fight because as a self-annihilator, Acheron has stepped into the shadow of Ix and has lost the meaning of her life along with her memories, meaning that she also spreads the shadow of Ix everywhere she goes. So as she uses great amounts of her power, she is kind of poisoning herself. Her skin turning pale and her eyes turning red is also a symptom of being a self-annihilator. So there is a huge drawback for her using this possible unlimited nihility power. That said, she has also been shown to be incredibly fast, being so fast in fact that she generates after images, but to be honest, she doesn't really need to use this because she has an ability that is even stronger. An ability that I like to refer to as Voidwalk. An ability we've only seen her and Polka Kakamon use. And this ability allows her to traverse the plane between life and death, allowing her access to literally anywhere in existence, probably instantaneously. She used this power in Amphroeus to guide us out of what was basically the still waters of oblivion, a realm between life and death, which of course is nothingness. And even even though she gets lost in the actual world, she is a master of navigating this place because, as she says,
"On the still waters of oblivion I guide the wandering souls."
She can also pull people into a specific part of this realm called the Horizon of Existence, or the Border of Nihility. So she can't necessarily throw you into the void, but she can throw you to the edge of it, kind of like a domain expansion. And let's be honest, domain expansion Horizon of Existence is just the best thing ever, come on. But if all of that wasn't enough, she is also an unmatched swords master who has successfully defended her world from literal sky demons, blew up the Penacony Dreamscape, disintegrated armor that was made from the Aeon of Preservation's power, and survived a black hole. Probably due to IX blessing her, but that's still an incredible feat of durability. And with all of that said, I bet you're saying, well, Herta's cooked. What could she possibly have in response to Acheron? Well, let's find out, shall we? Because it's time to talk about the genius among geniuses, the woman who has met the Aeons twice, the human who has lived multiple lives at once, the breaker of time and space, she who turns science into magic, the Madam Herta. You see, Herta has a long list of achievements, most of which were considered impossible at one time or another. She has also wielded the power of 2 different paths with complete mastery, so do not count her out quite yet. Let me explain. Herta is an emanator of erudition chosen for the purpose that she is a genius who is looking into the questions of the universe, the exact same purpose Nous was created for. But this does not mean that she has the same amount of access to power that Acheron does, because Nous is a computer and probably has calculated the precise amount of power to give her in order for her to be useful and achieve her goals, which in all likelihood doesn't have anything to do with combat. However, this power would be geared more towards obtaining knowledge, calculations, and solving problems, as she was able to download the entirety of another genius's life's work into her mind and instantly comprehend it. More on that later. So due to the nature of Nous in comparison to IX, Herta has much less Aeon power than Acheron, but it is this acquisition of knowledge that makes Herta's abilities that much more terrifying. Because other than her main path of erudition, she also has multiple ties to the Remembrance and has copied their abilities with such a mastery that it outclasses that of Fu Li's mimetic entities. That's something Herta and Acheron both have in common, by the way. The Remembrance just gets bullied. I don't know why. Anyway, because of this mastery of the Remembrance, she can duplicate herself and make herself incorporeal, as well as pull memories from other people's heads. But this gets really complicated when she starts to use the power of erudition and remembrance simultaneously to absorb memories with her puppet from a memory bubble that contain the specs to build what is possibly the most destructive weapon known to mankind. You guys know it, Herta stated it herself, the imaginary implosion pulse, the weapon that destroyed 24 planets with one activation. A feat that not even Acheron is known to match. But this is not all. Herta's bag is deep, because she has also captured and sealed a Stellaron before and defended her planet from the destruction 19 times. A planet called the Blue, that Herta refers to as her world, probably because her space station is in its orbit, but if this is in fact her home world, that would mean that Herta came from the Blue, which makes sense because this woman is an anomaly. Anyway, speaking of anomalies, her final feat that I will cover is her most impressive one yet. And that is defying all that is natural by de-aging herself. And you know what was the first thing she did after de-aging herself? It was show up at her own memorial to tell people that her death was greatly exaggerated. How do you hate this character? How do you hate Herta? Anyway, we really have no clue how she did this, but according to Screwlum, he hypothesizes that Herta found a way to manipulate time itself, something that Herta doesn't deny, replying with, "Some truths don't need to be spoken." Okay, so with both of these absolutely overpowered individuals' feats covered and analyzed, now for the moment of truth. Who wins in a fight? And if you haven't noticed, this fight is close. Acheron could just simply nuke everything in the surrounding area with raw power, but this would result in her own demise as well. forcing a stalemate. And you would think Acheron's void walking ability would allow her to instantly get the drop on Herta, but Herta can duplicate herself and teleport. And on top of that, she's had a run-in with another person with this exact same ability, Polka Kakamon, who even though wasn't trying to kill her at the time, did show her what this ability was capable of. So this isn't a really big advantage for Acheron either. She could also simply outspeed Herta, but again, incorporeal, she can just retreat into a mirror and do who knows what after that. Which also kinda nullifies domain expansion Horizon of Existence, because even if she did manage to connect, it's not exactly fatal. And before you call me out for favoring Herta, this fight doesn't yield much of an advantage for her either. She has her remembrance tricks, but invading Acheron's mind is a definite no-go. And we already know that the Nihility can and will delete memories. So this perk is also almost entirely nullified, at least offensively. And with Acheron's durability, Herta's only real option to do any possible damage is with the imaginary implosion pulse. Something that if Acheron could get in close, would also result in mutual destruction. So the only way I can think of this not being a draw is implementing circumstances. So as a final conclusion, being fair to both sides, Acheron would win in a scenario where they are just right across from each other in a straight up fight. Acheron is so fast that she would eventually catch Herta, and as far as we know, Herta is just a normal human biologically, so that would just be it. However, in any other scenario factoring in prep time, prior knowledge of capabilities, or even distance, Herta would find a way to defeat Acheron, even if it means sealing her inside one of her mirrors, connecting with the imaginary implosion pulse, or just figuring out a weakness, because genius. These two emanators counter each other's abilities to such an extent that they basically force a draw in most scenarios, each with Acheron in a race against the clock trying to blitz Herta before Herta can figure her out, which wouldn't take very long. Final answer being, it depends. But in most scenarios, I think I would give it to Herta, purely because Acheron's greatest potential feat would also result in her own death, and Herta's confirmed feat is greater than Acheron's at the current moment. 24 planets is bigger than the dreamscape. And we do not have any confirmation on Acheron surviving a black hole being the same as surviving an attack that uses the energy the fabric of the universe is made out of. And as for surviving a black hole, that also may have been a one-time thing, because not even Acheron wants what Welt Yang was threatening her with, and admits herself that his cane is stronger than her sword. Comparing that to someone who can just decide not to have a physical body, Herta's hard to kill. And if she does in fact have time manipulation, what's beating that? Fighting Herta isn't fair, and it is because of that this is the strongest playable emanator revealed. I know, I gave Herta the win, but Herta is just broken. Fighting her isn't just fighting one person. You are fighting Herta twice because she de-aged, and Chadwick, and all of whatever her puppets have learned over the course of their lives. So if a puppet fell into the void, she now knows how the void works. It's that broken. Everything the puppets know, she knows. The erudition is a very interconnected path that in essence represents being in multiple places at once. And that is just a very unfair thing to fight against, even for the void. Because the one person we know other than Acheron that has mastered the void just happens to be another Genius Society member, number 4 of the erudition, Polka Kakamon, who Herta doesn't seem intimidated by at all. This outcome is definitely biased, inevitably, I'm human, but I've tried my absolute best to keep it even because Acheron is also one of my favorite characters, and there are countless situations where she wins as well. This is a fight with the highest possible difficulty victories for both sides. But what do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, y'all.